And thank you, big thank you to the organizer as well. And my name is Gongchen Yang, and I'm the fourth year PhD student in the Department of History in the University of Warwick in the UK. And my research area is mainly in Chinese history and focused on corruption and governance in 18th century Qing dynasty. So you guys may think it will be a little weird to see like Chinese study at a conference about the scandal, because before the 1850s, there almost no public sphere in Qing China. In other words, the public could not participate in or have discussion about the scandal, let alone to influence the politics and anti-corruption. So as a result, there are almost no attempts, no historians are studying the scandal in Chinese history. But my recent case shows that the potential of scandal in the Chinese history, or more broadly, in the non-scandal context. So I would say that this is a very brave attempt to do, because nobody are doing scandal research in Chinese history. There must be some reasons. So I think I'm more like to looking for some possibility and give some new perspectives by doing so. So really appreciate all the helpful feedbacks from you. Thank you in advance. So let's move to my presentation. So firstly, I will brief my case and give two arguments about it. So this is a story made by Chinese and British. So their story told us in Qing China, the public is not necessary in a scandal. So in other words, so my argument would be, in different contexts, the concept of the scandal could be expanded. And so in my case, the Chinese bureaucrats played the role of the public, and their discussion about the scandal bring new change. And second would be, think about the process of how the concept is expanded is more important. So in my case, understanding this process, the key is to understand the intermediary. Okay, so let's move to the introduction of my case. So this is a story about one British East India Company's merchant. His name is James Flint, and he was left in China by a company captain in 1736, and he stayed in China and learned Chinese language and became the first Chinese interpreter for the company. And the foreign trade in China is seriously restricted, and in 4 ports. And in China, the European merchant could only trade at the Canton port, down the map here, and which means the Chinese official and merchants monopolize the trade in the Canton port. So the corruption followed. And Flint, he would like to deal with the corruption in Canton port by using some Western approach, which is the scandal. But it didn't work in Qing China because the official in Beijing chose to remain silent to the emperor, which means the attempt to making the scandal by Flint is failed. So in the 1959, Flint secretly sailed to Tianjin port, and he would like to petition the emperor directly and to expose the corruption and scandal to the emperor. So obviously, this is a case about cross-cultural context. So on the one side is British Empire and the company. Scandal was an ingrained component, is very Euro and common in that context. In other side is the Qing Empire. This is an authoritarian empire where public sphere was essentially non-existent. So the encounter of two different cultures opened my mind, and I saw some possibility from it. Because the Flint, as an intermediary, he was familiar with both side culture, and so he tried to use scandal, the tool of scandal, to to eliminate the corruption in China, but he failed. But as an intermediary, he began to try to transform the tool of scandal to make the tool of scandal more fit into the Chinese context. So this is the process of change, the concept of the scandal. So the Flint, his case shows that the scandal would be discussed among the bureaucrats in China, and their discussion, not the public, can influence the politics and bring some change. And the emperor, the king, as the absolute power in that state, could choose to make this change happen or not. So here I gave two arguments here. Firstly, I want to emphasize my focus is on the unconventional context, for example, colonies, cross-cultural context zone, and authoritarian regimes. So using the tool, the concept of the scandal in this unconventional context will help us to notice the neglected collective discussion. So I think the concept of scandal, to be more specific, is the concept of collective could be expanded. And second, we need to figure out how it was expanded. Let's move to the first argument. So I want to point out that the public could not be necessary in scandals. And we can see from Qing's PhD dissertation in 2021, and also compared to the definition of scandal later made by Ari, we can see that the third major requirement of scandal is there must be an interested public. But the Qing challenges point, and her research is about the Caribbean colonies, and in the pre-modern period, and because the context of the Caribbean and Qing China is quite similar, because the public sphere is quite narrow in the Caribbean compared to the Britain. It's quite similar to Qing China. So Qing's research inspired me. From Qing's point, historians recognize the importance of the public opinion, but it's very uncertain that to what extent the public opinion influence the politics and the politics. So this provokes rethinking about the importance of public opinion in scandals. So therefore, I think comparing to, instead of thinking about the public as a very necessary requirement of scandal, I think it's more important to think about the collective who will make some real influence about the politics. In other words, I think the concept of collective is very flexible, which means the collective in the West could be public, could be the public, but in the East it could be something else, which provides some evidence for extending the concept of scandal in different contexts. So in my case, the bureaucrats played the role of the public, because in Qing China, the emperor would sometimes open some scandal to the bureaucratic groups for them to discuss, and their discussion of scandals can always have some unexpected conclusion beyond the emperor's expectations or personal will, and sometimes even affecting the local power structure. So how the bureaucrats triggered unexpected changes. This Flint, the case of Flint, echo to the points made by Mark earlier. He politicized the petition and accused the corrupt individual. So which means the emperor focused on the corrupt individual rather than the institutional or systematic problem. So the emperor punished the accused official and nothing else. But the discussion of the scandal among the bureaucratic group came up with some new conclusion, more than the anti-corruption itself. because they think some evidence from the correspondence between the letters between the Canton local official, it shows that they are very worried about the Canton lose its control against the foreigner, because they think and the corruption is not a big deal, but the foreigner is out of control. That's the problem. So one of them submit a new proposal to the emperor to put a new port regulation to control the foreigner. And this is one of the reasons why the historian think the British would wage the Opium War 80 years later. So in the existing historiography, the new port regulation are attributed entirely to the emperor and the official who submit that proposal, and the discussion among the bureaucratic group are ignored. So I think it would be very helpful to rethink the concept of the collective, as one of the cause of the scandal. The concept of collective could be expanded. So in my case, the collective is bureaucratic, but not the public, whose discussion played a very important role in the political change. And I think by applying the concept of the scandal, use this approach could help the historian, maybe in focusing on Chinese history. They could rethinking the role played by the collective. Their discussion is very important, but always ignored. So because this kind of group, this collective, their discussion is often the driving force behind some very important policies and changes. So now the concept of collective could be extended, but how should we do that? And I think it depends on different contexts. But in my case, I think especially in the cross-cultural context, understanding the intermediaries is the key to understand it. Because this kind of group, they trying to understand and adapt the unfamiliar culture, and think about this process could show us how the tool of scandal are transformed, are changed, and what the collective would be if not the public. So I will show you how Flint transformed the tool of scandal. So on the left-hand side is the British context, on the right-hand side is the Chinese context. So at the very beginning, Flint tried to networking with the court and spreading scandal to the Beijing court, but it failed because nobody wants to impeach, to make the impeachment against their colleague, because they don't have motive to do it. So it failed. So Flint turned to some alternative. So in the British side, petition and complaint is a very useful tool, allowing the public to accuse public officials through petition. And in China, there are very similar practice. It's called Jingkong, a kind of legal practice to complain to Beijing, the capital city, allowing the public to complain to the central government. But there is one important thing is, if the complaints could not be resolved at the local government level, which means your accusation should be firstly going to the local government level, then higher level, then finally it's central government level, which means it's not allowed to direct petition the emperor himself. But we can see that Flint mixed two different practice from two different culture. It's kind of petition the emperor directly. We can see that it's not so British and not so Chinese. So, and as a result, Flint himself punished and imprisoned in Macau for 3 years and banned from going to China again. So, from Flint, his action, we can see that he was aiming at the bureaucrats, but not the public. So here's another evidence to show that when Flint petitioned the emperor, the first Chinese official who received him demanded bribes to help Flint spread the information to the Beijing bureaucratic group, and I think these think that this is a very necessary strategy to doing so. So, come to the conclusion about the argument 2. We can see that I want to say that my case only discuss the cross-cultural context, and understanding the intermediary is the key to understanding like how the concept of collective change. So in my case, the bureaucratic group or the group to have the collective discussion here. Okay, so here comes to the conclusion. So my case supports that the idea that the political scandal still have the power to generate collective discussion about bad practices in authoritarian states. And this discussion also contributes to reshaping collective values and bringing about greater change. So, and secondly, this case highlights that the concept of collective could not be public in some different contexts. And so the concept of the collective and scandal could be extended to fit into different contexts here. So in my case, is a cross-cultural context zone and the authoritarian regime. So maybe other historians can maybe find a different way of how concept was extended to benefit the research. And the expanded concept of collective could help us to identify neglected collective, and it emphasizes the role of neglected collective, their discussion and their role in the non-scandal contexts. Yes, and once again, I want to re-highlight that my presentation is a very brave attempt. So I'm still working on how the tool and the approach of scandal could be used in non-scandal context. So thank you so much for listening, and looking forward to all your valuable feedbacks and suggestions. Thank you so much.